All right, so we're continuing Triepeolus, and we're in the female key, but you'll see when we move to the male key here today that really most of the characters work for both groups. So we'll have covered in the female key most of the male key characters too, because they're analogous. And there's a few having to do with pygidial plates and whatnot for males, maybe a couple others. And then there's some tricky species to deal with. So I'm going to flip now to shared screen. I'm going to ask questions in the chat, and Claire will be monitoring that. And it is a small group today because it's summer. Okay, so there's my microscope, and here is, and oh, I should mention that I think maybe Claire did this by email. Mike is not joining us. He's off to Kansas to save the world by teaching people how to identify bees. So we're back into the Triepeolus female guide, and we're in what's known as the has section. So we've clicked on menu, and then we get this screen or this subset of frame, I guess it's called, over here, and we've clicked on has, and this allows us to see what species are associated with each of these characters. And we can modify that. We can actually say what does not have this character. In this case, we're looking at Clippius size of pits, which is what we're going to talk about here in a sec. And we can also look at what's scored for having it. So if we do this, say with the center one, which has large pits, obviously distinct from smaller pits. And this is a good one to spend a little time on because it's a little nebulous and it's sometimes hard to see. Very similar to the case of Agaposimum texanus scutum, where there's large pits and small pits, but the initial look is like, I see pits, but I'm not discriminating that there are more than one size. But if we're using this has thing, which is useful, particularly if you have a collection, to look for characters irregardless of what the guide is, we can say, okay, well, what has larger pits? And we see that 14 have been scored for having large pits in there. And we can then also, don't forget to click things off. This happens a lot where you leave a hanging check mark and it messes up. It's very interactive, right? So if you leave a check mark up here, who knows what's going to happen? It still says 14, but I've seen weird things happen. So you want to be cognizant that once you move on to another one that you check off things. So well, now in this case, we'll ask which species have been scored only of these three choices only for this one. So these would theoretically be the strongest cases for having really large pits. Like there's no ambiguity here. It either doesn't look like it has no pits, or they're all the same, rather they're all the same size, or it's a little bit distinguishable from having smaller pits. So in this case, there's only three, none of which I have. These are all Western ones, and which makes me suspicious that if I looked at them, I might score them for being indistinct also, but I don't have specimens right now. So if we go back here and we look at our has large pits, which is really what we want to see, all the specimens will show, it's easy to see that there's pitting. It's hard to see these vaguer, larger pits. So when we talk about these larger pits, what we're going to see is, well, actually, let's see here. We have a picture. Let's see if we can blow this picture up some. It's not very good on this very small screen here. I'll have to go back. Yeah, I'm not sure this really illuminates it very easily. So anyway, we'll look on our photos and then maybe under the microscope here. And we don't have the indistinct one. If we look at the all pits the same size, you can see all of these situations have pits. And obviously, when we're looking in the frame here, we have a problem of seeing the pictures blow up. Pic recently redesigned how photos are shown. It works great, but obviously it's not working great inside a frame. So let's go to a photo. So if we go back here and we click on has, which is the less narrow category, and we see here's our list of species, which could be said to have large pits as well as small ones mixed together. And we can see, we looked at lunatus, there's pectoralis. I'm going to pick another specimen here that I have in a picture of online, hopefully first. And we'll go over here. So this is distinctus, which is not listed for having large pits whatsoever. And if we blow up the shot here, you see that these pits are all basically the same size. Now, if we go back to I want to go back to my list of species of Triepeolus, and we look at, let's see, cressonii. Lunatus was one that had large, indistinct, at least, large and small pits. So let's take a look here. We zoom in. Now it's clear. So you can see, for example, there is a lot of the same size pits, and then there's these, and they're not as dense, right? So there's scattered larger pits within the field of all the pits here. And so there's another large one, there's a large one, there's a large one, and so forth. And let's see if we can find another example. And we can look under the microscope, but these are sharper. I think pectoralis, I want to say, was another species. We look over here, pectoralis, yes. Go back to a photo, pectoralis. And sadly, we do not have a face of pectoralis. So let's look back at helianthi donatus. I think I saw a donatus shot here. Donatus, and there is a face. And if we pull up this face here, this is a good example. Okay, so you can see in this photo that there is a field of very small pits everywhere, and then there's these periodic craters. This is a very nice photo because of the angle of the light. So it isn't obvious maybe at first brush, but a lot of the bigger pits too have a big hair sticking out of them. So if you look closely, there's one, there's one, there's one, and each of these others, there's another one right there. So I've got to move my screen down a little bit myself to see these. Can it go up one more? Oh, we can even go one more level. So even a little more clearer. So here, very clearly, there is a almost complete field of small pits. And then within that, for whatever reason, Triepeolus does these things, are these larger pits that I'm encircling here. And so easy to miss on first pass, but after you get used to it, seeing something like this, you can see that there are these larger pits within the field of smaller pits. Okay, I think we have nailed that one. Thank you, pictures. And we'll go back to the guide. So let me pull this back up. I think we may have mentioned this, but if we look at the length of the clypeus, so most of the time, again, if I click on this, it's not going to show this whole picture, but I think we can see this well enough. a lot of times when we talk length of clypeus, what we're going to do is we're going to draw an imaginary line across the very base or the end of the compound eyes and ask how much below that line is the clypeus. In this case, the wording here talks about 1.5 lateral ocelli diameters or more, and we're measuring, as is seen up here, our measurement tool is an ocellus, the lateral ones in particular, and we're saying how many of those fit below the line and within the clypeus that's falling between there. And it's long. It's certainly nothing like you might see in a blueberry using Andrina or Calides, but it's long when you compare it to its alternative, which is short, which is often basically, here's the imaginary blue line below the bases, and you can see the clypeus is hardly falling below the line. And the way Molly puts it is it's less than an individual ocellus diameter. So, and if we have ambiguity, we would have scored it for both cases. In other words, if it was a little bit longer than that, maybe we'd be like, okay, people could mistake it for one thing or the other. Here is, yeah, so that's the particular situation. Yeah, when I click on it, I don't get to see. I just wanted to confirm that. So
Sam, if you right click the link, the I_SB39, that'll open it in a.
Oh, there we go. Nice. Okay.
And you can click that, then it'll go big.
Yeah.
It's not really any better.
Okay. It's fuzzier because it's was meant to be a small thing, but this is also an example of a specimen that had very large, distinct, large pits, which you can even see in this fuzzy picture across a field of indistinct ones. So again, getting back to that large pit, small pit ambiguity. Okay, let's go back to the has things. We'll go down and look at a couple more characters. So we were looking at smooth unpitted lines last time, and I think we covered those. I will mention that, and we saw this in that one poor specimen that we picked where we couldn't see the line, that the line, when we talk about distinct, and do that trick right now, that distinct line here, that it's often stops before you get to the rim or becomes greatly diminished. And so the strength of the line is in this upper portion. It's most prominent up there. So maybe I should modify the character to mention that, so it's not necessarily a line down the entire longitudinal length of the latitudinal length. I'm not sure. The head to toe, top to bottom length of the clypeus. So here, integument colors of clypeus, so pretty obvious. So it can be brown, it can be red or orange, and sometimes it is a mix. Oh, let me click these off. Like I said, is good protocol, so that when we get to this head upper margin, presence or absence of narrow low carina. So if we do, let's do only present. This is one that I don't use very much, and there really are only a few species. We look at the particular picture that's presented here. So there's a low edge here. Now I believe, we can blow this up to some extent. It's not showing the original. This is nigrihurtus. So a carina is a raised line, and here it is. And in others, this would be what most bees have, which is just a smooth transition from the back of the head, which is fitting onto the pronotum, and the vertex here. So the vertex is behind the ocelli to the back of the head, and the cheek would be smoothly transitional. Now, if we go back and we look at what species are listed as only having that, we see Distinctus nevadensis nigrihurtus. So at least in the case of Distinctus, I believe I have a specimen at hand here from a lovely set that Molly pulled for me. And there is distinctus. I'm not sure. It's like a male. I'm not sure how it shows in males and females, whether the difference, but we're in the female guide, so we're going to pull a female. And we'll switch to the microscope and we will investigate carinii, or a carina investigation on the back of the head. So we'll switch this to live, put this down to a reasonable level of magnification, look for the specimen in the field, and it's a magnification. So we're looking for a line on the back of the head, distinct enough that it makes a good character because so relatively few have this. Let's see if we can easily see it, and I believe we can. So if get a little more magnification on here, I think even at this less than optimal angle, what we're going to do as I focus is, this is a little bit in focus, here's the head, eye, head, pronotal collar, scutum, and what we're looking for is along this rim on the back of the head is a carina poking up. I think this bottom part here has something to do with the architecture at the very internal part of where the head joins the thorax. This is the area here that is the carina. So you can see this thickened area there. I'm going to jack up the magnification a little bit more, and maybe I'll try a shot from the side so we at least get some visuals here. Also, let me pull it to full screen. Yeah, it may be because of the lighting, not quite able to see the topography well, but I'm going to switch it to more lateral view and see if we can make that carina pop a bit more. So here we're looking from the lateral side, and I think you can see give some more scancing light over here. You can see that this back area is raised up, not simply a smooth transition. It looks like a little bit there on the cheek, less so perhaps than on the, well, it looks like that it continues down here too. So I think we have seen what distinctus, whether this is the distinctus part, it's hard to tell, but it is one of the few that have a carina. Go back to the guide. We've clicked only. Let's see what happens when we click has. Ambiguity would show up here. And no, apparently the presence or absence of a carina back there is something that is less of a judgment call and more of an on or off situation. All right, I'm putting distinctus back to bed in its proper place. We'll move on, clicking off our has buttons totally. So here we have leg integument color that was on the front page, states we are also on there. Anytime you run into a situation when you think that a species should be scored for a state and is not, or province, let us know. We did a lot of these guides a long time ago in the early 2000s, and there has been a lot of new information coming through on the presence and absence and distributions of species. So anytime you have new information or think the guides are out of date. We find these all the time too, and we need to expand the number of states that the could have the species. So now we're getting into differences between particular groups. We could talk about that if there are any particular questions, but these are the kinds of things that I don't know that right now make a whole lot of sense to spend time on, particularly because we may or may not have both of the species, and we're not doing a complete dive into all the species combinations of the guides. Maybe when Mike develops a Triepeolus guide, we'll do a little bit more of that. So back again from the species pairs. Yeah.
Interesting. You talked last time about how, like, in her guide, she splits it right off from the jump with like white or yellow hairs.
Yeah.
You know, and that's kind of tricky. But then, so Nigerhirta, was that it? Yeah, had that carina that you just showed us, as does Nevidensis and Distinctus.
Yeah.
But those two, Nevidensis and Distinctus, once you get down in the key, no longer, that's not something in the key, in her key about it. So I think it's just another pointing out of like why it's good to have a dichotomous publication up along with Discover Life, so you can find these other quick jumps. Which segues to, are there tricky combos that might that we might want to talk about? Maybe not every single complex, but like ones that you have particular identification hacks for. Can we jump to some?
Right.
Those are really popular submissions of your wisdom that you share.
Yeah, so I should point out that in Molly's original revision, she left a couple things to be done later. One was a group that she called the simplex group. And so simplex keys out pretty regularly within the system. So it should key out fine here, but you should be aware that there's probably more than one species, and that revision is coming down the road. A trickier pair here, not so much Monardae, but this cressonii and helianthi are two species that get confused all the time. I believe both are helianthus specialists, so that doesn't help a whole lot. And we go into a lot of detail here in terms of telling them apart, but it's there's not a whole lot of magic to it. You just have to pay attention to a lot of detail, some of which is just a replication of what Molly wrote in her guide. And I wish Mike were here, because these are species that are more Midwestern, because there's more helianthus out there, type of thing. And they're probably on some of the helianthus specialist melisodes as hosts. So, and they tend small. So these tend to be smaller ones. So they're probably in there in the Trinotus slash maybe Boltoniae species of melisodes as that. So a lot of these key out pretty well because there's some pretty strong characters. So concavus versus remigatus. So both are non-typical in their choice of hosts. So they're not working melisodes. Concavus would be Sphaestra, and remigatus would be Pepinapis. Both Sphaestra and Pepinapis are now being conflated or not conflated, depending on who you pay attention to, as some kind of Usura type of thing. But we'll leave that for another day. So a lot of the difference here is remigatus has a different shape of the prone hairs, or the pale prone hairs on the back, compared to concavus. And so remigatus has this anchor shape. Do we call it anchor shape in here? Parasutum stripe of, well, we describe it as, what we're describing is an anchor shaped marking on the back, whereas concavus has sort of a shaggy border of white prone hairs along the edge of the anterior side of the scutum. And so they don't have this this interior architecture to that band of white hairs. But when you look at it, the remigatus has, which we can do, right? Let's take a look here. Hopefully I didn't leave anything undone, so let's has that. I just showed you everything because the way it's set up. There's remigatus. I believe we have pictures of remigatus up here. So yeah, here's this weird anchor-shaped thing. Whereas in concavus, there's a white which we also should be able to show, is a white shaggy edge, and remigatus, which is one of the most common, if not in some places the most common Triepeolus to be found, has this line going up. Almost all the other species have, in this area right here, just simple white lines of prone hairs that are invading into the dark space of the interior of the scutum. Also, remigatus has this really small black area surrounded by vast acreages of white. But just that back alone pretty much defines what remigatus is. And of course, it's a Peponapus specialist, so a lot of times it will be in and around pumpkin fields, but you'd be surprised where Peponapus shows up. So we find Peponapus in almost any boll survey in a field, even if there's no pumpkin or squash nearby. And there is interesting thing about Peponapus is that, and Xenoglossa in this area, is that there are no wild cucurbit species, cucurbita species here. They're all planted. So one has a better chance of defining where, let's see, call them food plants are, because they're going to be in a garden somewhere or a farm field, not just feral. I suppose it's possible that they're feral sometimes, but here again is this anchor shape, getting back to that. And if we look at concavus now, you'll see there's similarities, but the patterns are actually quite clearly different. So everything else is going to pattern out here and leave these two. And there also is another one with concavus, because it's a pretty distinct species, probably because it's been merely parasitizing Sphaera at this point. Let's see if we can find a back shot. Well, here, obliquely at least, you can see that this is solid. There's no intervening peninsula of black without prone hairs down the middle like there would be in remigatus. This is another shot here, and it's basically just a mantle of prone white hairs. It does have this, similarly, has a small white, and then these lines here on T2 are very oblique also, instead of many of the Triepeolus have this angle being acute. In other words, it's going in this direction rather than that direction. So I'll leave it at that. This is also pretty distinct, this very strongly arched rear end for concavus. It's also just a whopping big Triepeolus. If you have any comparative thing, it's going to be at the biggest site. Oops, I just hit restart. I really want to go back to has. We'll zip on down here. So a lot of these are on the front page. Thorax color, the presence of these little hairs. Well, actually, is this the hair one, or is it the next one down? Thorax lower half of mesopisternum, so the panel to the side and underneath the front tegula. Appearance of the integument between the pits, flat or nearly so. Not applicable because Sue hairy, raised, rough, as if uncovered, projecting lobes. Well, I'm going to have to look at this because this is not something that I see very often. Which species has these raised, rough knobs, and is that something we can see? Remigatus does. This is a strange
We don't have
Print
a
out.
plane there that's supposed to have.
Yeah. So I'm not sure why I'm getting that odd looking. I'm going to do has, unless I've got some hanging blue. I don't, because it's just opened. So let's try it with has. See, I'm not sure why it's opening up a new window, which I'm going to get rid of. And I'm going to try this again, but I'm going to do flat or nearly so this time. Yeah, odd. Something's happened there. I'm not sure what.
Just maybe make a new window because it's working for me. You got
Okay.
atripes or right?
Oh, I seem to be in a secondary window. All right, so menu as, and we're back down to integument of the thorax, raised rough as if covered with rounded projected lobes. Okay, now it's behaving only. So we can take a look at this. We have remigatus. Let's take a look. There is something called rugosus, which makes sense. And here is a lovely remigatus, and it is a female. And we will put it into the system, and we're looking on the side, and it's saying raised rough as if covered with rounded projecting lobes on the lower half of the mesopisternum. So we should see that towards the area that is traveling to the ventral side. All right. Pull this forward. I see a lot of heavy hitting here. Pull it forward again. So the dark area on the screen is the lower half of the mesopisternum. And there are, I don't know if those are projecting hairs or actually spines that you're seeing throughout these areas here. Go back to what it's saying. Raised rough as to cover the rounded projecting lobes. So these things theoretically are projecting lobes, but remigatus and the other species are usually identified prior to seeing that. I'm looking this under my other microscope so that I can look at the look at it from different angles and get a sense of. I could interpret that picture as being hairs rather than lobes. Yeah, I'm going to say that a lot of what we're looking at that seem to be raised up are small dark hairs that are melding into the background of the specimen, and that the roughness is very subtle. So instead of it being mirror flat, it's more like an undulating part of the surface. Let's see if we can contrast that with what they call flat. And so we're going to get rid of that. We have only flat and concavus, but that's not, interestingly, okay, so concavus is considered to be flat and remigatus is raised, but I've never seen it used as a way to distinguish the two. So it argues to me that this is one of the more subtle features in Triepeolus morphology. So let's see.
Picture.
Mm-hmm.
And maybe it's also because I'm kind of in a lacioglossom stage right now, but I'm looking at a picture zoomed in on the Triepeolus concavus page, and it looks like it's kind of like the difference of looking at different sputum textures, like a shiny, what we need versus like just having the it's flat in between, but then with the other one, it's like the pit itself is its own crater. It has its own lip to it almost. So that's what it's looking like in these pictures, at least. Is it looking like that underneath the scope? Like there's a whole little rim around the.
Yeah, I could. Yes, I would say that is, the idea of rugose versus rugulos and all that sort of good stuff. Here is remigatus, not remigatus, rhodinatus, which should be flat. So we'll just take a quick look here and see if there's some obvious difference that can be spotted within the microscope. And so I think what we're leaning towards is this is perhaps useful when you're looking at tons and tons and tons of Triepeolus, which very few people do, and more subtle and in need of extra specimens when you're not. So again, what we're looking at is something that's being called flat. And I think, again, we have here a lot less what you might call surface topography, but it's not. I'm just going to roll through the surface here with the focus knob, and a lot, it's on a spectrum. So I'm going to say maybe useful in comparison, but probably not going to be one of your, as it's not been your or our primary differentiation in the two. Okay, so if we get rid of that and we move down, thorax mesopisternum lateral, this is the presence of simple hairs, which we covered last week. So won't redo that. The color of the pronotal lobe already covered, color of the integument of the tegula also covered, stripes covered. So there's a lot. And then others are measurement things. So these are useful, but only, and they're basically a good surrogate for size. So, so at both of these, so we have total length as we just pulled this from Molly's work, and we divided them into groupings and in terms of total length. And here, because you can measure it more precisely when you're looking at the width between the tegula, we have also not individual numbers, but we have groupings and sizes. So here's basically small Triepeolus and great big Triepeolus. And if we have not left any hanging dots, we can see what is listed as big here in terms of distance between the tegula is nothing. Really, go down one further size. Oh, that's only because it's listed as only. So I'm looking at only things. So only nevadensis. If I switch that to has, I've got 14 there, and so quite common. And here are our monster big ones, Remigatus monardae and concavus, all pretty much closely related. And I forget on monardae, it's maybe another species that is a nest invader of Sphaestra, but I'm not 100% on that. It's a southern thing, not very common. I've only seen one. And then we have little itty bitty ones down here that are very likely attacking the smaller Triepeolus. So I think that takes care of the females. If there are any questions about females, we can just work
We have
at.
no question, Jack.
All right, so we're going to go to males, and as you can see up here, I can just jump to the males by just getting rid of the E and redoing that. And now we're back here. And what you're going to see, and we're really not going to just redo this for the males, is that there is a lot that's the same. So I'm going through here, not seeing so far anything different that wouldn't be in the female guide. And yeah, all the front page are entirely pieces of information that you would get in the female guide, hair patterns and such. And here we have, so I'm going to has now, and well, this one is a different one. So abdomen S4, apical fringe of hair color. So if we turn over a specimen, which I'll pull a specimen here, you can see that on S4, the there's a long fringe of hairs. And let's see, it has only brown and then brown and white mix. So concavus, professoris, simplex. So let's I think I have a fairly big simplex here. Is that a female? No, that is a male. Okay, let's see if we can spot this without having to take off all of its many tags. Yeah, so this one is a character that is going to be found only in the and I gotta find it in our chart. Oh, here we go. So let's take a look here at a low magnification first. And so is that 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7? I think so. I think that's one. I'm just going to be sure that that's one, not a leg. It does look like a leg. I may have to double check this, but this is, we'll call this 1, 2, 3, 4. I think this might be 4, and I may be missing one underneath these legs. But see these hairs right here, I believe are what we're looking for. I don't know what their function is, but this is the type of thing that's occurring on S4. If this were S4, first of all, that'd be 5, 6, that would be the right number. So I'm going to say this is S4. A little bit clumped. They should be more split apart, but you can see they're pretty prominent. They're long and curled and brown. In this case, we're talking about color of brown. And let's take a look here and see about all white. See if we can find a species. Move this back to, well, for only, nothing is only all white. Let's see if something is listed as white. And that means that there is a fair amount of ambiguity, or at least it's not always very often the case that you're going to find something all white. You'll find some combination of brown and white. All right, let me make sure I put this back in the right spot. Yeah. And oh, Dave Keppert has arrived. And so we'll put that there. And then we're going to look at donatus, which I should have a specimen of here, and we should see if I have the male. Do have a specimen here. A male or female. And that is a female. is female again. And let's check this one. And another female. I'm gonna run a female. Maybe we don't have. Oh, here's a male. And is it Donatus? It is. Okay, good. So now we're going to look again at S4. I'm just adjusting. These specimens have numerous tags on them, so I don't want to disturb or remove. Let's take a look at these, and indeed, it looks almost entirely white. And then there would be another, which we're not going to bother to show, that would have some white and some not white colors here. And you can see at the extremes, you get an answer, and at the middle ground, where almost everything is going to be about the same status, which would be a mix of brown and white. You're not going to resolve much with this character, but it is, particularly if you have all white or all brown, and particularly when you're looking at specimens that are falling in between, it's a character that adds to your arsenal. All right, well, let's first check to see. There's S1, S2, S3, S4. It does say S4, so it must be this second set here. And so this one, which should be S3, so here's the tergites. This is the side. Tergites 1, 2, 3 is a comparable S3. Here's 4, and there's a comparable S4. So, looking at that is like, is that brown or is that white? This is clearly white. This one, less clear, but it says in here that we are to look at S4. And so, again, it might not be the most useful of characters in there. So I just want to check. This is one. Oh, wait a minute. No, there's 1, 2, 3, 4. So this indeed, which is nice, because this is much more clearly white than this thing here. So this is S4. And you can see at that, what we're seeing right now is all white. Maybe there's something in the middle there that's brown. Let's look a little bit closer. And hard to tell from this angle, because a lot of times when you're looking at an oblique angle, things will turn dark when they're actually light. So we'll say, yes, there are at least minimum, there's white hairs present there. And you now have a visual of what these long curved hairs look like on the underside of a male. Sorry, I'm putting things back. A male Triepeolus. So let's move down. So we have, we're looking at the has thing again. We're seeing a lot of repeats. So these are all the same characters that be in the female. Now we get to a male character though. Pygidial plate, subapical ridge. So let me make sure I got rid of those things. I did not. And so when we're looking at the abdomen here, what you're seeing is a pygidial plate at the very end of the abdomen, and there is a ridge across that sort of divides this into 2 planes, or there is none. And so let's take a look here and see who only has a ridge present, and quite a few. So, and then who has them only as absent, and only 3. So sometimes it looks like there's a bit of ambiguity between specimens that don't have and do have, and there's less ambiguity when you have it. Sometimes it's pretty clear that you do have it and you don't have to. Move it. Since we had distinctus out a second ago, and is listed as only having a absence of a pygidial plate subapical ridge, so no dividing line. Oh wait, so sorry, I should clarify. I was looking at that, but subapical would be near the apex rather than at the base. So what we're looking at now is the absence of that. So there should be no raised ridge. Now, why is it a ridge and not a carina? I'm not sure. And again, this is not a character that I'm using when I'm keying things out. So now I'm curious. Here we have a specimen of Donatus, which should not, and then we'll move to one that does have the character and see if we have something to talk about. All right, so there's a pygidial plate, pretty obvious. Now I'm moving it. They have moved it too far and it's out of my screen now. Let's move it back in. There it is. I'm going to go up a little bit more in magnification here. So we're looking at an absent state, which is sometimes harder to discriminate, which is the absence of a subapical rim on a fairly small part of the specimen. So I indeed don't see a subapical rim, but I don't have a good visual myself on what is a good subapical rim. So let's flip back, look for what only has a subapical rim present and pull a specimen there. I'm going to move that into there. And we have a whole list of fairly standard things. So let's look at maybe lunatus. See if I can quickly pull a specimen. That's a female. That I think is also a female. Is. And we don't have, let's see, is pectoralis on there? It is. I have fewer males than females here. Another female pectoralis. This one looks like it could be a male. Nope, it is a female. And Michele michiganensis. I know I have some of those.
Not so many photos that are particularly helpful.
I know.
There's one in Triepeolus lunatus that looks like it was taken from Thomas on Furco. It might be that segment on a slide. I think that's what I'm looking at. But I don't think it shows that feature strongly.
Okay, I've got seeing it. Okay, I've got one, a male of a species that is supposed to have a subapical ridge. Let's see if the subapical ridge is findable. All right, we're going to have to zoom up. Move that forward a little. I think that is the wrong direction. Here we go. This is as high a magnification as I can get it. . Well, is this the proper term? So here you can see this, which in my mind was what we were talking about to begin with, which is a clear demarcation. And this is on one plane, this is on a different plane. I see nothing subapical ridge. And I would think if it was along there, it'd be called a carina. So subapical, so that's here's near the apex, but this isn't quite what I would call near the apex. But
Can I
I
read something out
Yeah.
of, it might be something that we need to change in our guide.
Uh-huh.
From Molly's guide,
Mhm.
page 6 in Molly's guide, it says male pygidial, it's in couplet 16.
Okay.
Male pygidial plate lacking distinct transverse basal ridge.
Ah,
Transverse basal ridge.
yeah, that would be this.
Yeah, and then male pygidial plate with distinct transverse basal ridge.
Okay, so here's a distinct transverse basal ridge. So my thinking is that maybe we used apical when we should have said basal. All right, so easy change on our point. And here is a good example of the subapical ridge. I have to say, though, that sometimes this entire segment is retracted and you can't see that area, but and also I think matching what Claire was saying, but not matching her guide's words, is this is where I looked for that thing too. And often I'm not using it an awful lot, but every once in a while I'm using it to confirm something. And it is a male character, so we'll have to look into it a little bit more, but I believe that does need to be changed from apical to basal. So there's also a pygidial width. I'm not going to bother working with these, but you would be measuring it against a cellar diameters again. Again, a little tricky because it's on the head and it's not on. Oh, we're a little over time, aren't we?
We are just at time.
Oh, okay, that's right. This clock is wrong. So anyway, just so that we do finish I'm looking at abdomen, sternum, presence of oppressed white hairs. This was on the female too, but again, you're looking for small. If you flip the specimen over, you're looking on different combinations of the sternites, of the presence, sometimes only on the lateral sides of oppressed plumose. Well, maybe not plumose, but at least oppressed, thickened with subhairs, white patterns of white hair, similar to what you see on top, but thinner underneath there. And we have the gray white, clippus length. I'm just scanning. Carina is there too. And then we have details for telling the different ones apart. And simple hairs again, we're all the same thing. So I think we planned that out really nicely. And but if there's questions, we can go into them.
There are not, and I'm copy and pasting something from the guide into the chat that says, just from Molly's key basal ridge. So yeah, I think we need to go in and fix that.
Yeah, I think that's the correct interpretation. All right. Well,
yeah, great.
We'll be around next week. We are constantly tweaking the guides. I believe that Francis is working right now on instituting Tom Ornifurco's Triepeolus revision into. We're confirming all the wording with Tom right now into characters compatible with Discover Life, and we'll be adding those in a moment. And we're back in discussion with Karen Wright about adding all her information on female Melisodes. She's busy with her startup, but we're starting to ask questions. And gradually, as you can see, we've added Mike Ardu's information, and we're constantly interested in chronically, I should say, interested in anything you guys can add. And if anyone's ever interested in adding, or as a student interested in adding literature, we can put them on that too. Anything else, Claire?
There are students interested in being involved in not just keys, but also photos and getting those up on keys or enhancing. We could use that. That's all.
All right. I'm going to say bye. Thanks, Claire.